Today we're talking election security with Mick Baccio. Mick is the Global Security Advisor at Splunk. Mick, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jessica. It's great to be here.
So, Mick, you ran the threat intelligence team for the 2016 elections during the Obama administration. That's correct?
Yes. I ran the threat intelligence team. Everything leading up to the election, the transition, and then the Trump administration after. So it was quite a time.
Quite extensive. Good. So also, I want to point out that you also were the first presidential CISO when Pete Buttigieg was running. That was a really big deal back in 2020. So I want to get to that in a minute as well. But I'm curious to hear your take on the bigger picture in terms of election security and what strikes you in terms of how threats have evolved between 2016 and now what we're facing in the run-up to the 2024 presidential elections.
So I think since my time in 2016, in 2016, we saw a definite, there was an email account that was compromised. There was a network that was compromised. It was a very, very cyber thing. In 2020, I think you saw a lot more of division and influence operations. And I think we've seen the amplification of that in 2024. And now, we've gone about 2 minutes without talking about AI. And obviously AI is going to play a factor in this year's election, whether we want it to or not.
Definitely. And you're reading my mind there. And I do want to talk about AI for sure. But before we do that, let's jump back in time one more time. Let's go to 2020 and tell me about working on the presidential campaign. What was that like? You were the first presidential campaign CISO.
So I was the first person to have the title, Chief Information Security Officer back when Secretary Buttigieg had his campaign in 2020. And it was definitely, I guess, unlike anything I had ever done in my career before that. Most of my time was spent in the federal government and in the public sector. And one of the things you learn quickly is that campaigns move faster than anything you've ever done. It is its own tax code. It's an organization incorporated, funded entirely by donations with a goal to elect the next president. And that's just a unique environment. And also realizing that everything that you do, there is an expiration date one way or another with that job. So every security thing you want to do, you have to kind of weigh out, is this a year thing? Is this a 6-month thing? Is this a 2-month thing? And that it just presents such unique challenges that I think a lot of folks aren't aware of in the security space.
Definitely. And can you give us an idea about the types of attacks you're protecting against and kind of the scope, how many, the scale of these that the campaign was facing at the time?
So I think it's a very unique environment in that because of my background, having been at the White House immediately before taking the role, my focus was at that nation state level. But to be honest, I think organizations like campaigns, their biggest threat is crime. It is just money crimes. The speed at which campaigns move cannot be underestimated. And you doing business, that is the goal of cyber criminals, to try and siphon some of that money. So, your basic criminal money crime is the big concern. But then also, like I just mentioned, it's that nation state lens where is there a government that is trying to look at my candidates, take their data, learn their policy positions? And we've seen that from state level actors going all the way back. My first experience was in 2008. So, you look at the evolution of that and then the branding. Did someone say something online? It's all those branding concerns that you have to be aware of, especially as more and more campaigns lean heavier and heavier into the digital age.
And I want to talk a little bit more about nation states too, and what you anticipate seeing from those different threat groups in the lead up to the 2024 presidential elections. But in terms of protecting a candidate, what are some of the things that people may not consider? You mentioned the money crimes is a big one. Nation states obviously trying to steal information. What are some of the perhaps overlooked aspects of protecting a campaign and the candidate?
So for me, it always started with a person. In my experience at the White House, we had VIPs that would travel overseas, and one of our responsibilities is to provide that technical threat brief. Hey, you are traveling to country X, be aware of these things. And I think those lessons really help me prepare how to keep individuals safe and secure online, that digital footprint that we all have, that we all leave. So one of the first things is figure out what the most important thing is. It's generally email. Make sure those accounts. There's organizations out there. Michael Kaiser, his group Defending Digital Campaigns, has tons of resources available to campaigns on both sides of the aisle, just discounted free services that would really, really go a long way to protect your candidate's digital footprint. Taking advantage of things like that, like hardware tokens, multi-factor authentication, but not just the candidate or not just the VIP. Understand that it's who they're talking to. So it'd be their immediate family, their parents, their spouse, their children, things like that, things you wouldn't ordinarily consider, but it is that digital footprint that would be an attack vector for high level adversaries that you want to be aware of.
Right. Talk a little bit about the particular threat groups, especially let's include the nation states here. In the lead up to the presidential elections, what types of threats are you expecting? Are you already seeing? What specific types of information are these groups, or what are they focusing in? What are they trying to get here? What's your insight on that?
So I think from what I've learned so far about this cycle and what I've seen in reporting is that there's still the same threats. There's still that I'm going to try and steal some money from your campaign because I know how much money you have. That's always going to be the threat. I don't think you're going to see a high level, spear phishing attack or compromise in that vein from an IRGC, Iran, Russia, or PRC, something like that. Those are the big actors that we've seen so far. I do think that when you look back at 2020, the IO, the misinformation, disinformation that was so prevalent then, I think has only been amplified. I think other countries have taken note of that and attempted to use that to sway elections. And I think one of the bigger problems is the inability currently to tie inauthentic behavior online. So you're seeing something that isn't real, but the ability to tie that activity to a sponsored actor, to a government, an unfriendly government. It's that ability, I think, that will give us the most trouble in trying to crack that egg leading up to the 2024 election.
And so now the big elephant in the room, election security, is AI this year. You talked a little bit about information ops. Generative AI has the ability, I'm assuming, to really amplify this and make these more believable. But what are you seeing? What role are we seeing AI playing now? What role do you anticipate it playing as we move forward?
So on the other side of the table, I think generative AI is incredibly useful for political campaigns. When you look at the features that it lets you kind of augment in your staff, you are writing, emails asking for donations. It's so much easier to do that. But on the other side of that, I don't think it's going to give that much advantage to a lower tiered actor. Right? Because when you talk about something like deepfakes, and deepfakes in 2020 was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do about it? And nothing, because it wasn't a problem. It was just a boogeyman. The amount of compute needed to accomplish something that was believable just didn't exist then. And even in 2024, as incredible as AI has gotten, those high level fakes, I think, are only capable by someone who possesses that much compute power. So it does raise the bar that way. I think it does, like I said, force multiplier for cybercrime, where it is a lot easier to generate that phishing email and send it out to a wider number of targets. I think the money crimes have gotten easier to accomplish with generative AI. And I think that is going to be the biggest problem because of, like I said, the speed at which campaigns operate.
But so even if the financially motivated actors may not be using that yet, but the nation states have the deep pockets and the technology, presumably, do you anticipate that being an issue from different groups that are linked to China and Russia, for example?
That's a tricky one because I don't know if we'll be able to discern that real time. If you look back at the 2020 election, it wasn't until, 2022, mid 2022, when all the analysis reporting came out and it showed exactly how much Russian influence had occurred in the 2020 election. So to detect it real time, I think that is such a huge, huge challenge. And the other part of it, I really think that if something happens, we've seen doctored video, we've seen doctored audio, we've seen that been released to the media, and we've seen retractions come from that. Hey, that was an error. That wasn't the actual thing. But that retraction, you've been in the media game for a while. You know that it comes later. No one pays attention as much to that. Once that news hits, it's out. So, to the point, does it have to be the best or does it have to spread the fastest? Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing a lot of that now in a lot of social media channels, is just the rapid spread of information, whether it's incorrect or correct, the speed at which it moves, the damage would already be done. And I think that's the biggest concern, is trying to, detect what's not real time, and then dispute that. I think that's going to be an ongoing challenge going forward. And I'm all ears if anyone has ideas how to get ahead of it.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sure that this will be a hot topic in the months to come. And so, Mick, maybe we'll catch up after the fact, and then we can recap what happened, what did or what didn't.
I just love that. That would be, we'll hang out in the middle of November and just go, that's how it went.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great afternoon.